Hello, everyone, and happy Sunday. Thank you for joining CoSAFF and thank you for being with us today. My name is Jigar Shah, and I'm the festival manager of Chicago South Asian Film Festival, which is one of the 7 festivals which have come together to create CoSAFF this year. The festivals of CoSAFF include the Sweet South Asian Film Festival, Chicago South Asian Film Festival, DC South Asian Film Festival, Mosaic International South Asian Film Festival, Nepal America International Film Festival, South Asian Film Festival Montreal, Vancouver International South Asian Film Festival. We will be talking to our audience and our filmmakers and taking the audience questions during this Q&A. So please send your questions to our panelists at slido.com using the event code 76653. The link is also in the description of this video below, so make sure to send us your questions. And now, it's my honor to introduce and welcome this wonderful team of Pride and Protest here with us on Sunday at CoSAFF. Welcome, guys.
Hi.
Hi.
So please, I'm so pleased to introduce the director and the filmmaker of the film, Mr. Blaise Singh, who is the man behind this wonderful documentary with the wonderful cast, Vaneet, Mehta, and Manpreet Dhindsa. Welcome,
Hi,
guys.
everyone.
Hi.
Lovely. Pleasure to be here, Jigar. Nice to join you today.
Yeah, thanks for
Thank
having
you.
us.
Thanks
Thanks
for
for tuning in, everyone.
Thank you, guys. Thank you so much. First of all, Blaise, congratulations for such wonderful and impactful documentary. I went through mixed emotions throughout, your documentary, and I must say, wow, your first film and such a wonderful creation, such a wonderful craft. So thank you for, sending this craft to the rest of the world. And super excited, to talk about your documentary. So I was watching through the film and, LGBTQ and people of color who are marginalized community across the world. And you have artistically brought out different areas of those communities through your documentary. Tell me how this story evolved and how was your journey from Blaise as a school teacher to a filmmaker?
So I would say I was a filmmaker before I became a teacher. I mean, filmmaking has always been, I guess, in my DNA in some shape or form. And just growing up, I used to use film as a way of escapism. And I remember in high school, and this is kind of linked to my role as a teacher as well, but in high school and even in sort of primary school and middle school growing up, I never felt like I belonged. And I used to use TV and film as a way of escapism. And I remember watching shows, in particular, two shows, in fact. It was the animated X-Men series, and it was Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And 2 of those shows really helped me to get through a moment of hell in my life. I mean, anybody who watches Buffy knows that in Buffy, high school is a metaphor. Going to high school, it's a metaphor for hell and the whole kind of like experience of growing up and that whole puberty and kind of all these other things that happen in the series. It's one big metaphor for how high school is like hell in one shape or form. And X-Men is a metaphor, of course, for the marginalized communities. In particular, it's a metaphor for the queer communities and for the Black and people of color communities. So I really connected with these 2 stories, and I kind of would come home each time every day after school, and I would kind of have on VHS, I'd be recording these films and watching them back and just having a really great time, just absorbing myself and escaping into it. So that's when I kind of decided that I wanted to make film, and I kind of, for the next few years, I was working on just creating projects with friends and doing things off my own back, creating short films, writing scripts. And it just so happened that I bought my first camera and a laptop and I started editing content. And I did a music video first and foremost for a friend, and I was acting in it as well. And a friend of mine was also acting in the music video. And we really just decided that at that point that this is something that I want to do. I want to tell stories, but also for, you know, for kids like me who felt that they needed to escape. I wanted to create stories where they could relate to characters and they could resonate with the characters that obviously that we were presenting to them. So I eventually set up a charity called Make a Difference Entertainment, or MADE. And through MADE, we started running projects. And it just so happened that the charity caught the attention of a principal who started a local school, which is the Global Academy. And that principal called me in for a meeting, and we decided to have a little chat, and he was actually really keen on getting me involved in becoming a teacher. So I was like, okay, cool, I'll give it a go. And I was really apprehensive because, of course, you know, my high school experience, it was hell for me. And I thought, you know what, I'm actually quite scared of doing this. But then I thought, why not just do it, you know, go for it and see how it plays out. So I went along and I became a teacher for a whole year, and I was there for a whole year, and I enjoyed it. The pupils on the whole were relatively well behaved, very engaged in the material. I was teaching TV studio operation. I was teaching how to make films. I was more of a practitioner overall, because I had the lived experience, and I was kind of teaching them from that kind of point of view. But within the school itself, I mean, I hadn't come out as gay, so to speak, but the students actually found out that I was through social media. And it just so happened that there was one incident that you see in the film where I confront them about, and there's a note that I present to the group, and I talk to them about it. And I just kind of used that as an opportunity, not just for, you know, to prevent it also for it to happen to other students, but it was also kind of for my own self, for closure as well, because at that moment it just felt like I was saying everything that I needed to say to those kids in school who used to bully me and say things, and all these microaggressions that I used to receive. So I felt at that moment I needed to say something, and I used that as a way just to release and almost find closure in my own kind of personal backstory. So the teaching, I decided to kind of give it up, because I thought I wanted to concentrate more on MADE, and I wanted to really focus on the difference that I was creating through the projects that we were running. And it just so happened that we decided to do a project called Rainbow Films, and that was bringing together queer people, local queer people, who would come together on a weekly basis, and we would really just use those sessions as a way to get to know each other, but also get off our chests, you know, any issues or things that we were struggling with. And those conversations that we had started to build up, and we decided to make a documentary from that. And that's how Pride and Protest was born, as a result of all these interactions that we had in those projects.
Wow. What a tremendous and wonderful journey, Blaise. I really liked, you know, when you mentioned about that school teacher scene, which was actually very, very impactful to me when I watched the documentary, where you were showing, you know, the kids about a different assignment and a project, you know, and it was fun. There are lots of scenes, Blaise, in this documentary, which I found that every scene you picked had some story behind it. With people, with incidents, with situations. So first, when I started watching your documentary, and the first scene where you are laying on the grass and getting this voicemail from Farhan, that itself, you know, was a very bold and very interesting start. And right there, after that, you know, you get into the protest. That was another scene which was very touching and very, very strong. You know, to get to, you know, that whole microaggression, the word which you used. So let's talk about one of the scenes, Blaise, you know, which is kind of what I was wondering, you know, if you can throw some light on. There is a scene in, you know, there are a bunch of people. There is a black man sitting and talking about how he feels, you know, appreciated when he gets an attention from a white man, right? And so what do you think? How much is that colonized, you know, in terms of skin color, your physical attraction? What are your thoughts?
I think it's very colonized. I think in actual fact, when we talk about racism in the community and when we talk about prejudices, a lot of it does come from the whole politics of desire. And when we talk about, the experiences that we do have, we talk about it through how we're judged and how we're perceived by the wider LGBT community, which is the white community, so to speak. And a lot of the times, we feel that we are, in a sense, seen as undesirable in certain ways because we are belonging to the Asian community, the Black community, the people of color community. And there's this whole notion, in fact, that actually exists about this Eurocentric notion of beauty, light skin, white skin, light eyes. These are all things that, generally is seen and deemed as attractive within the queer spaces and online and in person as well. So, sexual racism is something that's quite common within the LGBT plus community. And I'm speaking from my personal experience as well, kind of going on dating apps and, seeing on the apps people when they write no Asians, and people say this whole debate about prejudice versus racism. And people say, oh, it's not racism. It's actually a preference as opposed to them having these prejudices. And, there's always this ongoing debate about that because, you're discounting and you're kind of rejecting a whole race, just based upon your preconceptions. And you say, you're completely saying, I don't want to date Asians or don't want to date Black people or people of color. So it is, in my view, it's racist. And a lot of people who are queer people of color see it as racist as well. So that's why, a lot of the times we want to create our own spaces. We want to be able to exist and we want to be able to talk about these things because you can't really express these things with the white community. I think they don't really understand it because they just feel, oh, okay, yeah, I think you're overreacting a little bit. So what if someone doesn't fancy you? It's not a big deal kind of thing. But it is because, there's so few people of color anyway as well. And I think even with people of color, they also embody that internalized racism at sometimes as well, because they also feel that, I don't find other queer people of color attractive. And they kind of fall into that trap as well of that whole, again, Eurocentric notion of beauty. So I just feel that, there's a lot of work that needs to be done in challenging these prejudices that people have. And I think, Grindr is the number one dating app, they call it. It's really a hookup app. And it's basically the number one app for gay and bisexual men. And they recently removed the ethnicity filter in a bid to try and tackle this whole sexual racism thing. But I think it goes beyond that because it's not just about filters, it's also about the descriptions. And people are continually and still writing these things like no Asians and no Black people and stuff. And I think these are things that we need to address and tackle. And it's not pleasant for somebody on the receiving end. It's not pleasant to be able to be seeing that on a regular basis. So I think that's where more work needs to be done, certainly.
Great. By the way, I love your pet, the dog Phoenix. He was amazing. Have you had any plans of casting him as well in your next?
Well, I'm thinking of doing a whole documentary about a life of Phoenix, but yeah, that's in a work in progress at the moment. So yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. Thank you so much, Blaise, for sharing those insights with us. I would now want to hear from Vaneet. Hey, Vaneet, how's it going?
Good. How are you?
Good. First of all, congratulations and thank you for such a stellar performance in the documentary. You were just rocking. So, Vaneet, question. I was going through it and I saw, you represent a proud bisexual man in the documentary and as well also in your real life. Tell me more about what are the top 3 things people say about bisexuality, that annoys you personally, and how do you deal with them?
So the first one that I always say about that annoys me the most is the one that I always hear first, which is, which do you prefer? And it annoys me to no end because, one, who said I preferred one gender over any others? Who said that? 2, what business is it? Why do you need to know? What does it mean to you? It makes no difference. It's just someone being completely nosy and trying to find out your like sexual and dating history. And it's like, you don't need to know this. There's no reason for you to know this. And a lot of the time they're asking because they're trying to pigeonhole you into your like true sexuality. And I just don't play ball with it. I'm like, you're trying to make attraction so simple when it's really not, and I just don't want to hear it. Stop asking me. The second one is a lot of people say that bisexual isn't real. They say that bisexuality is a phase, that we're undecided. And it's not true. There are plenty of bisexual people who are bisexual throughout their whole life. But we also have to embrace the fact that sexuality is fluid. Sexuality can change, and that doesn't mean that those sexualities aren't real. It just means that we can move from one to another. Plenty of people go from bi to gay, but plenty of people go from gay to bi too. And it's very dismissive. People will say that bisexual men are all actually closeted gay men. They'll say that bisexual women are all actually straight and are just trying to gain the attention of men. And it's all this like sort of double-edged sword of basically erasing people and fetishizing them. And yeah, not a fan. The last one is people using the incorrect definition of bisexual, saying that bisexual means attraction to men and women, and therefore that we are transphobic because we are excluding non-binary people, agender people. They also say we're excluding trans people somehow, even though they say men and women, when trans men are men and trans women are women. It makes no sense. And every time someone says that to me, I'm just like, do you want to meet the 20 million bisexual non-binary people I know? Because I know a lot of them, like a lot. And it's completely invalidating of their sexuality and their gender identity. So those are the top three that annoy me. And the way I deal with it is I try to educate people, either through stuff like this, through the film, through panels, through talks, through writing, basically anything I can just to inform people. I've done a few talks for corporate people as well, just to sort of go through all of these myths and just explain the problems with them. But also, I have no qualms with blocking people, ignoring them, unfriending them, removing them from my space. Because I'm like, if these are the things that you hold, especially when they're part of the LGBTQ plus community, I'm like, there's no room for you here. Like, you need to learn about other sexualities, or you need to not be in the LGBTQ plus community. Simple as.
I agree, Vaneet, and you really rightly pointed out it's not your business, right? It's something which is very personal, and it's your choice and preference. Actually, I was just looking while you were talking, I was looking at your shirt, and it's very interesting, some people are gay Asian. Can you tell me more about this? This sounds a lot of fun. What does it mean? And can you just educate all of us?
I mean, so this is a shirt I got from a foundation, a British Asian LGBTI, and they basically it's sort of in a similar vein to Stonewall t-shirts. So Stonewall have a lot of shirts that say like some people are trans, get over it, and this one was just like a fun play on words to be like Asian, LGBTQ plus, Gaysian sounds cool, and just to remind people that a lot of people see LGBTQ plus and think of it as a white thing. And it's just to remind people that, hey, there are South Asian LGBTQ plus people, East Asian people, Japanese, Chinese, Malaysian, whatever you want, you can still be LGBTQ plus. There's Black LGBTQ plus people. And it's just as a reminder, like, queer people of color exist.
For sure. So thank you, Vaneet. Thank you for sharing those insights.
No.
Yeah. Now coming to wonderful Manpreet.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Manpreet, what a brilliant performance. I was just blown away completely. Congratulations. You were
Thank you.
just splendid in the documentary. A woman of color and being bisexual. Man, I am sure, you might have faced enormous challenges, from your family, from your friends, society, pressures, I'm sure, your family might be telling, when are you getting married, being a
Yeah.
woman,
Oh,
right? That
God,
pressure
yeah.
is always there, right? So how do you deal with all that?
There's so much pressures from all aspects of my life. I think, like Vaneet had mentioned earlier, just the fact that being bisexual alone, regardless of what my ethnicity is, I have so much like backlash with people trying to pinpoint my sexuality and pinpoint me for being a lesbian just because I always tell people I have a strong connection with women, but certain people just think that, oh, me liking other genders doesn't exist, but that's not true. I think no matter who you're with at any point, you're still bisexual, and that's a problem for me. But yeah, I get a lot of pressure from family members, of course, about like marriage and thinking that like a woman should be of a certain like nature in order to be eligible to get married. My family don't know that I'm bisexual as well. That was mentioned in the film, but that is still as today. They don't know. Well, so I deal with it by having a form of escapism, and that is honestly through the online queer community. And this has been a thing throughout school because where I grew up in Southall in West London, most people, you're going to find like 80% of the people there are Indian, Pakistani, Bangladeshi, like everyone. So I felt at home in terms of being Indian, but I was the only queer woman in that entire school. And it made me feel so isolated because I thought this surely I just thought like, wow, maybe I'm not supposed to be who I am. Maybe there's something wrong with me because surely this isn't the thing that I'm the only queer person here. There was another gay person in our school, but he was white. So I had a lot of trouble with that because I felt like I didn't really see myself. I didn't really see belonging in any communities. Because I made queer friends online and they were all white. And still to this day, I think about 90% of my queer friends are white. So it's quite overwhelming for me. But I try to deal with it by doing things like this with this documentary. I think having really open, healthy conversations with the cast members and people who I met throughout Rainbow Films was really a good way to deal with it because it made me realize that there is a place out there for me and that I need to sort of be more active in like showing my existence to everyone and that maybe finding my space. And I guess, yeah, also just living your truth. You can't really do anything. Everything comes with a lot of struggles, but there's only so much you can kind of blame things on and look at the imbalances. You just have to kind of, stay true to your own character and just hope that people accept that.
Very well said, Manpreet. I can totally, feel your story and, your pressure, you brought it out. And it's so interesting that you mentioned that, your family still doesn't know. And so what are your thoughts? Let's say if they're watching right now, this live interview,
Oh God,
and they find out,
I'd love off.
I'm sure, you have that strength, but kudos, I was very impressed with your performance and story you told through the documentary.
Thank you. That means a lot.
Yeah. So please, coming back to you, another thing which I was thinking is from the filmmaking perspective, was every scene you picked in the documentary. Personally, I felt that every scene could be a separate documentary in itself, or I would even say that a docu-web series. And that's just my personal observation. I'm sure a lot of people might have told you about this. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, interestingly enough, we kind of had this idea about doing like an origin story for every single person who's in the documentary as well, because we kind of, the tagline, the unofficial tagline was Queers Assemble for the actual documentary. So we kind of had this notion where we're in a way, we're kind of like our own X-Men, we're our own team where we've kind of got together and we're kind of fighting, prejudices along the way. And one reviewer, in fact, actually said that we in a sense were heroes as well in ourselves. So I thought it'd be really cool to do an Avengers style origin story for everybody who's in the documentary. And in actual fact, I am doing that at the moment. So Rico, the trans male that you see in the documentary who shares their story briefly, with him, what it was is Rico's story was so interesting that I thought it could actually be a documentary within itself. So over the last few months, when the Black Lives Matter protests were happening, Rico was quite active in visiting the protests. So I went along with Rico. We also did some live feeds on our social media, and as a result, that documentary has now been picked up by an online broadcaster, and we're going to be shooting a couple more days worth of filming, and that should be out just before the end of this month. So we're already in the motion of creating new stories from all the characters that we kind of set up already in this documentary. And I think we want to really go for intimate portraits because, as you said, there's so much richness in these stories and there's so much more that I want to find out. Manpreet, Vaneet, they could have their whole documentary about what they're doing right now because life doesn't stop. Their story is ongoing, and it's just so good to be able to try and capture these things. We could have like a Real Housewives style docu-series, the real activists of London, we could call it. But I'm just thinking like there's so many possibilities that we can do with these, these characters that we've set up. And as it so happens, we in actual fact had so much footage of everybody that we could theoretically have already done one episode per person if we wanted to, and then pitch it to an online broadcaster. So that's something that's definitely in the pipeline, and we're going to, look at exploring that and seeing if, if it takes off and who's willing to take it on board, basically, in terms of a commissioning point of view.
Sure, yeah. And just curious, Blaise, how did you find this cast, and how much research it went for you, to get to making this documentary?
So when we started the project, there was a few initiating participants who formed the core group. And as we went along, some of the participants started dropping out. So it just so happened that it was a majority of the white participants just dropped out. And we were just left with a queer POC group, which was great in a way, because we were like, well, this is our chance now to really, really take center stage and own the narrative. And let's just talk about ourselves and let's make this about us. So the remaining participants then put some ads out online. And that's when people like Vaneet applied, Manpreet applied, Farhan applied, Rico applied, all the new members that came along, the ones that you actually see in the documentary, they came along, and they really made the group what it was, because it was their energy, their infectious enthusiasm for the project, just their whole being, and the fact that they were so, up for activism, up for getting involved, and just, really, really welcoming and allowing the group to just form friendships. And I keep saying that we became a family in our own right, because we were. Every Saturday we would meet at West London Film Studios. You would have our session from 12 to 5 p.m. and we'd sit in a box. It was literally a box without any windows, and it was just a room where we could just sit and talk and be ourselves, practice techniques when it came to cameras and lighting and editing and all these other things technical, but also just giving us that safe space. Essentially, we created a safe space for ourselves to be able to be free and to be able to create something that we felt that going forward, we could influence other people to change minds, change hearts. And through this documentary, we wanted to, I guess, have a legacy of this project. And that's what we did. That's why we decided to have rainbow films in the spine of the documentary. And going back again to my whole X-Men thing, in a sense, I was like, and it sounds big-headed, but I was like Professor Xavier, and I had all my, my students who would come to me, and we were like the school for the gifted youngsters, and we would go out on missions. So every time we'd go to Pride, we'd go out there and we'd kind of collect all these great interviews, and we would share them with the world to see and hopefully contribute to reducing prejudice, because everything that we wanted to do ultimately boiled down to us trying to reduce prejudices about our community. And I think we're well on the way of doing that. And initially, the documentary was just shown in LGBT spaces and festivals, but now coming to CoSAFF, this is a really great opportunity for us because it's going to the people that we need to see this documentary. Our South Asian aunties and uncles need to see this stuff. They need to know that we exist, and they need to know that, you know, we are normal people. You know, we have normal lives in the same way that they have normal lives as well. And I think this documentary is certainly a bridge to achieving that connection.
Blaise, I can tell you, a lot of uncles and aunties are watching right now. So,
Hi,
Hi, auntie. Hi, uncle.
Hi, auntie.
Don't hate me.
And at this point, I would like to remind our viewers and audience, if you have any questions, please send it us via this link on Slido, so we can hear more, from our audience and viewers as well, and we can get to hear from our film team right now. So before we switch to this, one of the questions, Vaneet, for you, I had, and in the documentary, I see there are a lot of references of education, which you have made, starting from this protest around this school, and then going forward, there's focus groups where you're talking to people about bisexuality, you're talking to them. There's also one of the really bold scene where you are at the sex shop, right? And you're talking, and then Farhan is there and educating people on a lot of stuff. The question is, what role, if you think, sex and relationship education can help addressing those issues?
I think it could play a very big role. I think for me, I knew I was not straight when I was around 10 or 11. And at that point, we still had Section 28 in the UK, which only got repealed in 2003. And I entered high school as that got repealed, but I didn't know that that was a thing. And the curriculum clearly was not updated, because when I was in high school, even though that section wasn't around and they could teach LGBTQ plus stuff, there wasn't any. And I went through the whole of high school without being taught it, which meant that for me, personally, that will affect everyone, all LGBTQ plus people. But when you're talking about sexualities, which are so often erased and invisible, such as bisexuality or other things like asexuality, it gets even worse. And so, like, for me, I had those feelings when I was 10 or 11, but I never heard the word bisexual until I was 17. And that's quite a gap. And if we had sex and relationship education, which taught about LGBTQ plus stuff, and I mean all of LGBTQ plus stuff, not just gay, and not just talking about this is what a relationship could look like, but actually talking about the issues they face, and actually talking about what homophobia is, what biphobia is, what acephobia is, what transphobia is, actually unpacking that. Because, when I was in school, I didn't know bisexual existed, but I had these feelings. But all I knew was there was straight and gay was bad. And gay was constantly shown to be the bad one. So if you just have that education and you actually teach people, listen, you shouldn't be this, what you're doing is discrimination, this isn't good, this is what it causes, this is the impact, and actually teach these things, as well as teaching the whole of the spectrum, teaching people that there are other sexualities out there, other ways to identify, and giving them visibility as well, like having role models come in, which is something you see in schools now. You see role models going into school and talking about their experiences. I think it can have a very profound impact and help people come out a lot earlier than I did. I mean, I didn't come out till I was 24, and there's so many reasons for that. I feel like education can play a big part.
Very cool, very cool. So I must say, guys, our audience and viewers are really watching this, and I'm flooded with questions. So I'm gonna go and switch back to the audience questions. And again, feel free, any of you, jump in, whenever you feel. So one of the questions I have is, how have you adapted your activism in the COVID times?
I can start. A lot of my activism is online anyway. I do stuff in person, but I do a lot of my work on blogs, on writing. I do stuff on Twitter, and I'm still doing that. So I'm trying to constantly put out information. I recently wrote an article for Stonewall. I wrote quite a few pieces around Bi Visibility Week. And actually, even though coronavirus isn't good, it's a really bad situation we're all in at the moment, it has given me more opportunities to actually help educate people, because normally I would be doing my 9 to 5 at work, but now I can actually take an hour out of work to be on a panel online, which I can't normally do because it would be a whole day. I would have to go to their office, do it, and come back, and I wouldn't be able to get that time off work. But now I can just take the hour out, sit in my room, do a panel, and then go straight back to work. And it's actually helped me reach a lot more people, and it's given me a lot more time because I'm not commuting anymore to do my writing.
Very well said, Vaneet. I'm actually looking at my iPad, and one interesting question comes up, Blaise, for you. Jazz asks, the reaction shots at the bus stop and other public places, how did you capture those reactions while filming?
Very, very difficultly, because I think when we were there, we were actually expecting people to be a lot more vocal and have a lot more reactions, but they were quite subtle. There were glances and looks. And because I had a little camera, I actually had this camera, this tiny little camera with me.
Oh, okay.
So this was one way in which I was very discreet, and I was able to capture people's reactions without them necessarily noticing. And obviously, the people who they refer to, we've blurred faces out because we just thought, obviously, it's directly saying about someone. But generally, when you're out in public, there's this rule where you can film members of the public, and we were just able to capture that, very, very kind of discreetly with the small cameras that we had. But that day, I remember those days, they were freezing cold. We were like, come on, someone say something, someone react, because we were just waiting for people to do stuff. But everything was looks. I think the main reaction you'd probably get is probably from groups of guys, because boys are very vocal when it comes in, especially groups of boys, and there wasn't anybody about at that time. And then also at night, I think if we had done it at night time, especially if bars were closing and people are drunk, you would have got all kinds of reactions, I think. But I think from the reactions that we did get, it was very telling that people just weren't comfortable with it. We had people moving away as well. And obviously we're in between, we're trying to capture the action with the couples, but we're also trying to get reactions as well. So that day was very interesting. But ultimately, when it comes to members of the public, it's quite unpredictable, because you could be there for hours and nothing happens. But luckily we were able to capture just people, people looking, people staring, and their glances were just enough to tell us that, Vaneet would explain as well, how did Vaneet feel? Vaneet felt uncomfortable, just didn't feel at ease at all being there, and, being around people who were looking at you like, you were doing something really bad. So, for us, it was quite interesting to just capture these reactions. And we did hope that there was going to be more, just from a more cinematic, dramatic viewpoint. But, what we had was enough to tell us that, I think there is a lot that needs to be done to challenge prejudices still in this day and age.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing those interesting facts. That was good to know. Manpreet, this is for you. Coming out is very difficult in communities of color. What advice do you have for people who are afraid or don't have the support?
I think that if you don't have the support, don't be ashamed to go to communities that you don't really identify with as a person of color, because sometimes you can't do that. And if you don't have that space, you need to try and infiltrate any single space you can. So what I did was, because I was actually 13 when I came out, and I didn't even fully understand it myself. I guess I was always just a very accepting person, and these traits were just there ingrained in me. So to me, I just thought it was okay. It was perfectly normal. And then I came out and I realized this is not okay. Everyone is completely like, you know, being so terrible to me. And of course, I was in a community in my area where everyone's a person of color. So I turned to the online community and I turned to people who could just relate to you in terms of your sexuality, in terms of your feelings. And that's really how you get to understand yourself. Because if you find people, you don't have to find people who are people of color. It's a shame that there aren't as many who are out and proud. But I think if you find just any sort of LGBT like person, then you start to open up a conversation and then you start to understand more things about yourself. It is daunting, but I think that's probably the best thing to do, because you need to just know that there are people like you out there in the world. And if even after you've done that, to find people of color like who identify as queer, I think just being yourself in these heteronormative spaces is enough. Because me personally, with my friends, I'm very out and proud about my bisexuality. And especially in my university, I knew so many Asians, and I would constantly talk about my bisexuality, and that made me find people who were queer. So because when you see other people like you talking, you think, oh, I'm comfortable, so I can say something. So that's the thing. But I will say that, of course, it's not going to be an easy journey. Like, this is going to be my 10th year of being out. Like, that's a long time. But then I still realize that there's been so many things that I've realized about myself over the years. And even now, I'm still trying to deal with the fact that, and this was brought up a lot in the movie as well, I'm still trying to deal with the fact that being a person of color, you're automatically seen as something that's like less desirable. And that is something that's like really been like on my mind. And I think as a queer person of color, it just becomes even worse, because a lot of people that are idolized in the LGBT community are mostly white. So, and there's lots of like the people who love like the old like white ladies, or just like that strong man. Like it's all very whitewashed, and it's difficult. But definitely, I think online communities are very mostly good when it comes to the LGBT community.
Can I also just add, today is National Coming Out Day, and a lot of people online agree on this fact that if you don't have support and if it is unsafe for you to do so, there is no shame in not telling people.
Yes.
You don't ever feel pressure to tell anyone. At the end of the day, to tell people is a privilege. And there's no point risking your safety for it. A lot of people say that instead of calling it coming out, it's calling letting people in. And you shouldn't let people in who are going to harm you. So if you're in a family situation where, there's a chance that you could be chucked out of the home and you will have nowhere to live and no support network, there's no shame in not coming out. And we all still love you anyway.
Yeah, that's a really good point, actually. I should have thought about that too, because when you had said the question, I immediately thought of someone who's thinking of coming out. But yeah, if you're a person who feels too scared to come out and just feels like your time's not ready, but you feel this sort of sense that I'm not going to view myself until I come out, that is absolutely not true. Yes, there would be parts where you would have to, maybe censor yourself, maybe not show all your current interests. I'm currently in that situation too. So I'm not exactly the role model for out and proud to everyone. I'm only with my friends. My own family don't know. So when I'm at home, there are certain songs that I don't listen to. There are certain shirts that I don't wear because it says girls like girls. So it's really, I really do resonate with that. And I personally don't feel like I'm ever going to come out to my mom, maybe to my siblings, because they kind of grew up with the same culture and they maybe would be more accepting. But I think right now it's perfectly okay that I might never tell my mom that I'm bisexual, because at the end of the day, if you feel like you need to have some sort of stability, whether it's emotional, financial, social, then just don't if you don't feel like you can hold your own. Because right now I'm not financially stable, so there's no way I'm coming out in case I get thrown out. So I'm just not doing it. So it's good to look out for yourself as well and just know your boundaries.
And it's what Manpreet was saying about like coming out. Like people say coming out, you assume that you've come out to everybody at the same time and you've done this whole broadcast. There's levels. Like you'll come out to friends first of all, you know, people who are close to you, then your family. Like I didn't come out to my family. I didn't actually come out to them. I was outed in my 30s, but my friends and my colleagues and everybody else, you know, outside of the family knew about me. So you can actually find, you know, we talk about chosen family as well. You can choose your family when it comes to the LGBT plus community, because there's so many vehicles and ways in which you can do that. There's organizations, for example, the organizations that you see in the documentary, UK Black Pride, Hungama, you know, these kind of organizations and these groups are out there to actually, you know, incubate people who are finding it hard to come to terms with who they are, but also giving them that space where you can say, okay, this person is exactly like me. I can relate to this person. You can make friends with people, you know, you could have that support system. So it's important to realize that while, you know, coming out doesn't necessarily have to mean that you're going to, you know, lose everything. You know, again, what Vaneet was saying, only feel comfortable with what you feel is right at the time for you. Don't feel pressurized into, you know, telling everybody and everyone at the same time, because you don't have to do it that way. And not everybody does, you know, so there's stages to it, and do make use of the various services that are out there, you know, there's various groups. So I think these are things that people need to, you know, be aware of when they are coming out and making choices to decide to come out.
Yes, it's very complex.
Very well said. You know, I'm sure all our viewers who are watching this, you know, they're getting the strength from all your words, you know, ideas of coming out, and it's a National Coming Out Day, which is great. It's a perfect timing for the documentary as well at CoSAFF. So one of our viewers, Sonali, asks, Vaneet and Blaise, could you both speak about that conversation you both have about bisexuality, where it seems like Vaneet is confronting Blaise?
Yeah, because it's like, you know, when I mentioned that whole Real Housewives thing, I think we wanted to kind of go for some conflict in the documentary. And what it was is really, it was a conversation that I had with Manpreet and Farhan, and we had filmed beforehand. And Vaneet wanted to talk to me about it. And it was from my own personal perceptions of, and wrongly so, I had made an assumption that I thought, you know, Vaneet was potentially going to come out in the same way that I did. And obviously there's not this one size fits all for everyone. And I've discovered that. And my own journey in this documentary has been learning so much. I think my mind has just been like, I've just broadened my own horizons just by being part of this documentary. There's so many things that I just wasn't aware of, and so many sensitivities within the community to be aware of. And moving forward, I think I'm a bit more, you know, able to be more sensitive to people's needs and also be more understanding as well. And I think that's where Vaneet came to confront me about, and rightly so. He put me in my place.
I think that's the thing, is a lot of people, so a lot of people use bisexual as a stepping stone to come out as gay, because they think that bisexual people somehow have it easier. Like it's like one step foot out, essentially, and you would like use it to test the waters. And I understand where they're coming from. I am sympathetic, because obviously they want to use that so they can just retract it later. But it causes problems, because first of all, bisexual people don't have it easier. If you look at statistics, not just from the UK, but in the US as well, bisexual people have worse mental health, higher rates of intimate partner violence, and lower coming out rates as a result of all of this. So I think a lot of people think bisexual is an easier way, but it's technically not. And what it does is that it becomes self-perpetuating. So people do it, and then that makes people think that that's what everyone does, and then less people come out, and then it just keeps going round and round and round. Because there's a constant assumption that everyone who comes out as bisexual is going to then come out as gay, because some people have done that. And I think the thing that I want to keep reminding people is that even when people do that, that doesn't mean that that is what bisexual is. And maybe one day I might come out as gay, but that doesn't mean I'm not bisexual now. Like, I think it's really, really important to remember that sexuality doesn't have to be a state of permanence. Bisexuality can change. You can, like, we're constantly learning about ourselves. Through every experience, through every year, we learn more and more about ourselves. And we may decide later on that it's like, actually, now where I am at, this actually fits me better. So for some people, they do it to make their lives a little easier. For some people, it is just a change, but it can go different ways. Some people, I know people who've gone from lesbian to bisexual to asexual. I know people who've gone from gay to bisexual. I know people who've gone from bi to pan to gay. Like, there's so many different ways to identify, and it's really important that we stop questioning people when they change and just accept the fact that they've gone on their own journey.
Yeah, no, it's very, very well said. And actually, Sonali has a comment for you, Vaneet, that she loves your shirt. So just wanted to pass that comment. One of our viewers, Shireen, asks, and we talked about this colorism and racism, right? So on a very similar lines, she asked that colorism and racism still exist within the South Asian Desi queer communities. Especially, towards the Black and other people of color groups. How should we address that amongst ourselves?
I think you need to address it the thing is, it's so deep rooted, and it's really difficult to, of course, like, de-root these things, but you have to start by looking at yourself and thinking, like, maybe, am I playing a part of this? And you need to realize who is around you, who is your circle, because sometimes you don't realize that you're actively participating in this thing yourself when you are unconscious, like subconsciously making friends or like dating people who all have this sort of like accepted, well, they're all your version of what's accepted. And I think you need to challenge these things. Of course, like sometimes, like, I mean, because we discussed earlier, people say it's a preference, but then maybe it's not, maybe it's just what we've been taught. And I think we really need to give a voice to people who face a lot of colorism, because yes, everyone here is a person of color. However, I would personally call myself quite privileged because I am not exactly dark skinned. People have said to me, you're really pale for an Indian. So I don't receive as much colorism as someone who is darker than me would. And what I would do is give that person a voice, because we can only speak for ourselves, but if you promote people of color who are Black, people who are, especially, I mean, like South Indians receive a lot of colorism, people in Sri Lanka, it's good to find their work and to promote them and to retweet their things, to show everyone, look, these people exist, and that to really praise them as beautiful, because like I was saying before, because all I saw in Hollywood, all I saw that my friends would praise, my white queer friends, they would always sort of like simp over like white queers. So then like in my head, I'm thinking, wow, like those people are to be like, to be sort of gawked at. But then if I would tweet about an Asian person, like a South Asian person who I think is so, so beautiful, and who I think's like, really has like, is just really amazing, there won't be as much reception, because not many people also think the same thing. They'll just retweet to say, oh yeah, power, yeah, that's amazing, but really they're just sounding like they want to promote it, and they don't actually think this person is on par with like white queer people. And I think you need to push it in everyone's head. You keep pushing it, you keep promoting them, and eventually people will kind of like see that they also are in our spaces and they deserve to be there.
Right. No, exactly.
I would just add that I think the thing that we learn a lot, like I think the protest showed, the protest around Black Lives Matter, the whole movement shows just how much worse Black people have it. Like if people didn't know before that, like that is a moment to learn that. And when you look at statistics of everything, you will always see that whilst we do experience oppression, Black people experience it worse. And obviously that means that there's colorism as well. And, you know, we all know the whitening cream industry in India is massive. And we need to remove this like colonized idea of what is beautiful. Like we were talking about earlier about what is desirable. We need to remove this from ourselves. And it's not enough to not be racist. A lot of us consider ourselves not racist because we don't say slurs, we don't abuse people. But racism can present itself in a lot of different ways. It can be preferences, it can be microaggressions, it can be who's within your circle, who you befriend, who you date. It's a lot of different ways it can present itself. And it's not enough to not be racist. You have to be anti-racist in everything that you do. And that always starts with yourself. I saw so many people at the height of the protest coming out and saying, I stand in solidarity. And every single time I called them out and was like, what about this thing that you wanted? Why don't we talk about that? And they refused. And they refused outright. And it's, if you're not going to look at your own behavior, there is no point going further. You have to always start with yourself. And it is our duty to educate ourselves, to unlearn all of the stuff that we have been taught, all of this colonized idea, to unlearn it and to grow from that. And then use that to teach others.
Yeah, absolutely agree. I always tell people every color is beautiful and unique in its own way, right? So we have one or two more questions, time for one or two more, and then we will definitely end this wonderful conversation. But I must say that, viewers are really enjoying this, and I'm flooded with questions right now on my iPad. Blaise, one of the questions, this is very interesting. One of the viewers is mentioning, thank you for sharing the story of POC queer folks in UK. When a supposed ally like J.K. Rowling passes a transphobic remarks, how does it affect your movement?
Oh, God. I think Vaneet's probably more qualified to answer that one. You'll have a lot to say on that.
Do we even need to mention her? This is a safe space.
Yeah, I think we try not to give coverage to certain people in this space, but I think when it comes to the work that we're doing, I think in particular, we've really been focused on obviously the queer people of color movement, basically from the work that we're doing. There's so much more that we want to do in terms of activism and reaching out to communities. But from our point of view, when we created this documentary, it was purely just about our stories and about the interactions that we were having. And we didn't really think that, okay, we're doing it to represent particularly this community or that community. We just thought, you know what? Let's tell our stories and let's try and get people to resonate with what we're doing and connect with what we're doing on a level so that when we do kind of create our content, we can share our content and we can kind of build an audience from that. But moving forward, I think we're definitely trying to do a lot more activism in projects that we're running as well. Like from Maid's point of view, we're looking at ways of continuing the Rainbow Films project and continuing the conversation, having a whole new group come in and work on a whole set of new issues as well. So I think we're really looking forward to that as well.
Great.
I think it's really important to remember that a lot of what J.K. Rowling is saying is very much white feminism and TERF feminism. And I think it's really important to remember that trans people are not infringing on anyone else's rights. That trans rights are human rights. And it is our duty as everyone in society, especially within the LGBTIQ community, that now more than ever we need to stand by trans people and to take off lifting because their rights, like in the UK, I don't know about the US. I know there's stuff happening in the US as well. In the UK, their rights are being rolled back, and that needs to be stopped. Like the GRA reform got chucked out, and it's really, really important that we try and stand by them, that we do everything we can. We sign petitions, we talk to people, we educate people, and try to make them understand that trans people aren't a danger, that they are just trying to live their lives.
Right. Very cool. We'll definitely end our conversation with this last question and any closing remarks or comments or thoughts you have. But Blaise, if you can talk about how did you obtain the funding of this film, and do you have any projects planned for the future?
Yeah, so our funding came from an organization called the People's Health Trust, and they were actually interested in tackling health inequalities. So when we created this project, we weren't actually funded per se to make a documentary. What we were funded to do was to run activities on a weekly basis that brought together local LGBT people so that it could contribute to decreasing social isolation, decreasing loneliness. And as a result, we then decided that we wanted to use the activity, the weekly activity, the meetup group, so to speak, as a way to create something meaningful and in the shape of the documentary. So that's how that kind of came out. So moving forward, we've actually got several projects that we're going to be running. So Black Rainbow is what I talked about before with Rico inside, but there's also a documentary, a working title called Too Sikh, Too Queer. And that's going into the very marginalized Sikh community, who's a minority within a minority, because obviously the Sikhism religion is they're so, in terms of on a worldwide level, it's one of the smallest religions in terms of numbers, and also in terms of visibility as well. Sikh people who have turbans and beards are very, very actively discriminated against. You know, they have it really hard in the LGBT community, on dating apps and bars, going out there. So this documentary is about 3 people from the Sikh community, in particular one person who was forced to get married as a woman, another person who was the Rav Bansal. He was a winner at the British Bake Off, and he's an out and proud gay Sikh man. So, you know, we cover his story as well. So that's a project I'm really, really looking forward to, because I feel that it's a community that hasn't really had a voice, and we really want to talk about this community a lot more and get them out there and change minds and change perceptions in the same way that we had done with Pride and Protest. So we're definitely looking forward to that. The other thing that we're running is a coaching service for BAME and LGBT plus people. So we're running sessions for that. We've just got funding to do that, and that's going to work with people who are interested in pursuing careers within the creative industries, and it's giving them the tools to set goals, pursue goals, and also to build resilience against COVID, because so many people now are just demotivated and just feel like there's no hope for them. You know, people are saying the job market's like unsecure, and people just don't feel like there's a space for them. As it was hard enough for us to be represented in the creative industries, and now it's even more challenging because, you know, the first people who are getting fired and made redundant are BAME people, and that's a fact. So we're trying to tackle that through providing coaching services to give people some positive hope for the future and allow them to be, you know, have a process of self-actualization where they can create goals and work towards meeting these goals.
Very cool. Very cool. Any last comments, thoughts, Manpreet, Vaneet, from your side?
I just want to say to everyone that it's just incredible the amount of positive reception that we've received. Starting this project, I mean, we never thought like it would reach so many like places, and it's just incredible because we really, really put a lot of work into this, just because we wanted to kind of have that representation that people they never really had back in our days. So it's nice that a lot of people are receiving this with positivity, and it's really important that everyone continues to have these conversations. And like we said, we need to all analyze ourselves. So it's really important that everyone does that. But it's just been amazing, and I think I wanted to like point out as well that this film has really done well with looking at such individual, unique stories, because I personally didn't really feel like I necessarily had a big story anyways until like Rainbow Films made me feel like I do, just because like I had said this in another Q&A that like I'm not really like I do believe in like, you know, justice, and I'm always fighting for equality. I'm not exactly as vocal about it just because I live I have like a job, but you know, I'm focusing on like trying to do music and learning things. But I feel like that shouldn't, just because you are not as loud in the LGBT community, that does not mean that your experience is less valid and that your voice isn't as important. So I just want people to know that you can literally be from any corner of the world. No matter how little you think you've impacted anyone, you are just as important.
I'm just going to say one day Manpreet is going to be a recording artist and they're going to be selling out the O2, so like, whatever.
Awesome. Congratulations.
We'll get there.
Yeah, I would just echo what Manpreet was saying, and what Blaise was saying earlier is that it's such a privilege to be at a film festival such as this. We've reached quite like a lot of like LGBTQ plus spaces, but to really reach the South Asian community through CoSAFF, all of these incredible South Asian film festivals across the world, and to have inject a queer voice into these film festivals is such an honor. It's such an honor to be doing a Q&A at it. I'm really glad that like this is still happening despite COVID. So yeah, like I was imagining like us flying out one day, like going to like the South Asian Film Festival.
That makes me so sad.
Aunties and uncles, and then them telling us off for being too queer. But, like, and yeah, I'm just really, really touched, and just want to really thank everyone that's been part of CoSAFF for having us, and for everyone online that's watched. And I really hope that everyone has taken something away from this.
Definitely, and the feeling is mutual. We feel the same way. Thank you so much. I got so many comments from the audience. This conversation is very enriching, very hopeful. Thank you for sharing your thoughts. This amazing comments, you guys are flooded with so many comments and so many blessings, on this National Coming Out Day, which is perfect opportunity, to have you guys at CoSAFF. So thank you guys. Thank you once again, Blaise, Manpreet, Vaneet, for sharing, your stories, your filmmaking, the art of the craft, and thank you to the entire film. Thank you so much to all our viewers as well. Thank you once again.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye everyone. Take care.